All right, welcome to Halitics. So glad to be with you today. It is a Monday. It's an Arlen Monday. Arlen, I know with a little bit of tech issues. I don't know what it is. Apparently, the system doesn't love you. I had to reboot it twice. Let's hope it doesn't recur. But it's great to see you after 1 week break.
Yeah, I'm glad to be back, Hal.
And you were in Quebec. I was asking about that during the break before the program started, because I was there only once. Probably now it's been over 30 years. It was the second and my first anniversary with my wife, and I really liked Quebec a lot. You mentioned it hasn't changed in that it's still a francophone city. You don't speak English there.
Yeah, it's different than almost any other tourist city that I know of, just because they very strongly, push English aside and just stick with French on everything, which, as I said, is kind of surprising in a tourist town because there's so many English-speaking people that could benefit by seeing some English. But I guess the Quebec people are very stubborn about their language.
Yeah, we don't have a great image of you, Arlen. I'm not sure if there's a problem with your Wi-Fi at your house, or maybe you've got it plugged in. I really don't know, but now see you're coming back in, so hopefully it'll stay stable. I mentioned we were having some tech issues. They weren't due to Arlen's connection or anything like that, but certainly the visual, if he doesn't have a great wireless or doesn't have a good network system, there could be a problem.
Well, for whatever it's worth, Hal, the tiny little screen on the bottom right that I see, at least, is very sharp, has been good, but somehow the bigger image does not look as good.
I think it's because when it's bigger, it just, if we compress the bigger image so it was small, like on your screen, it would be better. But you look good now. It's better. I think both of us, especially me. I don't want to say anything negative about you, but I also benefit from a rather a sort of an unclear, muddled image may look better for many than when I'm shown as clear and you can see all the warts and the holes and everything. So Arlen, we're going to get to your topics in a moment, but just to get back to Quebec for just one more second, it is interesting. They really don't like to speak English there, which even compared to Paris or France, where maybe they feel very defensive, right? That they're in this mostly English-speaking country, although the province itself is French, but their language has been under attack by the English for a long time, and maybe they just feel really defensive about it, which is understandable.
They apparently do. They're very, very rigid about that.
All right, let's talk politics. That's what we do on Halitics. And before we get to the always disturbing news from the Middle East, which, Arlen, I'm sure you've noticed, it's just gotten worse. We now see another front. We've seen Israel going after Jordan, certainly Lebanon. They've now bombed Syria. So this is very, very troubling. I don't know. Have you observed that? Did you see that story? 16 dead in Syria now.
No, I actually didn't, but it's not surprising. The news there always seems to be bad. Netanyahu doesn't seem to want to have a ceasefire. The Americans are trying real hard, at least they say they are, and people keep dying, and you got to feel sorry for the people of Gaza. They're just
worse.
They got to deal with polio and all kinds of horrible things, and not enough food, and this has got to stop. There's got to be a ceasefire, and Israel doesn't seem to want to cooperate, from what I can tell.
Not in the least. Do you see, obviously this will have implications for the race. We put up there, will Trump win? This is secondary to the latest David Brooks piece, where he concludes that Trump will win. At least that's the title. I mean, it's provocative, right? How Trump will win. Do you buy the argument, and we'll get right into all the details, do you buy the argument, though, that Netanyahu really, really wants Trump to win, and that's why he won't negotiate in good faith with Hamas and with the other Middle Eastern countries?
I don't know if that's the reason our election matters all that much to him, but he wants things to stay the way they are. He wants to continue the war. Otherwise, he's got his own criminal charges to face, and he'll, if they had an election, he would definitely lose because he's not popular. So I think he wants to just keep things the way they are, and that's really bad for the whole region.
Yeah, I actually agree with you. I don't know how much he really cares about the election, but my sense is that he probably, much more so than Putin, although maybe Putin as well, would prefer Trump to win. I'll be honest with you. Putin's support for Trump, for the reasons that he would have to support Trump, I share those reasons. I want peace with Russia too. I agree with Trump's stated policy towards Russia. If indeed Putin believes that Trump would make peace with Russia and end our proxy war, I would view that as a positive, reason to vote for Trump. The flip side of that is, if Netanyahu really believes that there would be zero resistance whatsoever from a Trump regime for anything that Israel would do, and maybe he's right, that's a very strong argument for Kamala Harris, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think Netanyahu likes Trump because, for one thing, Trump is an authoritarian, and that seems to be the kind of people that are coming to the fore these days. Authoritarian leaders who, make strong decisions, and that seems to be, all throughout the world. We might talk about El Salvador and their situation there, but I think, and of course, Trump was very good about giving Jerusalem, making Jerusalem the capital and all that. So he's very favorable toward Israel and hasn't really pressed Netanyahu on anything. So yeah, he would be better off with Netanyahu. But I'm not too happy with Kamala too, because she's sticking with Joe Biden's position, and I think that's a mistake.
All right, the situation we mentioned, terrible. So I mentioned Syria. First, we'll go to Gaza, where I always center the terrible situation confronting the people there, and of course, I feel for those people. I don't think there's any ethnic group on the planet right now suffering to the same degree, and they really have no allies, no friends. Yes, Iran is doing what little it can for them, but Iran is beset by the U.S. and Israel. Saudi Arabia is also a threat to Iran. Saudi Arabia couldn't care less about. This is a group that's just been left completely on their own, and they're being killed, murdered at a tremendous rate. 20 killed. This is just at least as the intensify in Gaza. And I always blame Biden-Harris for this. 40,972 is the latest count I've seen. 20 yesterday, and I think that's about 70 over the weekend, Arlen. Numbers may be slightly, the death rate may be climbing at a slightly more slow rate than it has, or slower rate, but obviously it's deadly, it's murderous, it's awful. And as you mentioned, Biden haven't done a thing. They've helped it. They've excelled. They've provided the killing machines for the Israeli military.
Yeah, it really is inexcusable. And of course, the Israeli people really want those hostages, and that obviously the way we're doing things hasn't worked either, because they're getting killed off by bit, and we don't have an answer yet, and it doesn't seem like the Biden administration wants to make any major changes. And Kamala's in a situation, I think she doesn't want to offend Biden or make him look bad or be different than Biden, but she really should. I mean, she's spoken out strongly in the past. I wish you'd speak out a little more. She's just trying to be nice and moderate, and I don't think it's a good thing.
Well, it's not nice at all. By the way, I took you off screen, Arlen. It's nothing personal, but you really are, you're not coming in great. And I don't, if I had a picture of you, I'd share it, but I don't have one. So we'll just put up the guest name if we can, so people will know. And if you come in better, again, this is nothing personal. I want to have Arlen. I'd much rather personal. Heck, I'd rather have Arlen's face up there, but we just don't have the clear shot, the clear enough shot to do that. So I'm going to just leave him off for now, and hopefully that'll clear up. So do you think, Arlen, it's good. Well, first of all, you said she just wants to be nice to Netanyahu. I mean, it's not nice at all, right? When you think about it, it's horrible. It's it's sort of like being nice to Hitler, and I don't think that's an unfair comparison. Do you think it's good politics, though? How do you react to it as a political move?
I think what I really said was she doesn't want to offend Biden or, people who support Biden and, doesn't want to look like she's, disagreeing with him. But I think she should. I think she's got to make a separation from Biden because Biden certainly wasn't very popular. And, Kamala comes across as being very nice, pleasant, smiling and all that, but she's really got to be tough in these kind of situations. And, by moving a little bit stronger against Netanyahu, that might help her. But she's not obviously listening to me. She's got people who are telling her, don't rock the boat, but it's not working for her. And
it may not be, you're correct. And I just want to keep showing how awful things are in the Middle East. So Israel opening up yet another front against Syria. Obviously, they feel emboldened enough to do it. They're not worried about any U.S. censure nor about reprisals. So the situation in north of Israel is awful. The children of Gaza, this is an absolute humanitarian crisis of the worst sort. Second school year now without schooling is beginning, but not, obviously, the school year not beginning there in Gaza. Families have been ripped apart. For me, Arlen, and just please, share why you think this isn't a strong enough reason not to vote for Harris.
Well, of course, we always end up with the similar situation as always. It's either going to be Trump or it's going to be Harris. And I think if we have Trump, I think it'll be a disaster. And right now, I wouldn't be surprised if he wins because she opened up like a 2 or 3 point lead a week or two ago, but hasn't done any better since. People are not really being drawn to her popularity. And, it's scary for me to think what Trump would do if he and his MAGA people, got into office. I mean, Project 2025 and all the things that they would like to have happen. So, there's no doubt in my mind that I want Harris to win, but I don't think she's, making a smart campaign right now. She's got to look tougher and stronger, and she's not.
Again, I want to apologize to viewers for just showing me and not Arlen on the screen. Again, we're having some tech issues getting a clear image of Arlen. There doesn't seem to be anything I can do right now to change that. So I do apologize, but I will continue to check to monitor his image. And if it gets better, then we'll put him right on screen. Here we have the latest poll, Arlen, just came out from the New York Times. This certainly supports your view, which is that the Harris campaigns don't rock the boat, go along with the Biden team's policies, may not be working as well as it seemed to be working in during the convention and in the week after when there was a significant bump. Here, the Times shows the plexiglass effect, the rebound effect. Plexiglass, you push it and then it comes back at you. So that's kind of the plexiglass effect. When polls shift strongly in one direction, then they may come back a little. Here you see Trump, according to the Times, one of the top pollsters, according to 538, actually having Trump up by a point. And to me, as a neutral observer, one who doesn't support either Trump or Harris, that poll is very bad news for Harris, assuming it's replicated in the days to come, because Trump generally outperforms in the Electoral College his popular vote.
And not only that, when it comes down to near the end of the election, he's always a few points behind and then gets those extra votes to do better and improves upon what he was told to get. So, that's worrisome to me. Tomorrow night is going to be important, of course, to debate, and maybe it might be Kamala Harris's last chance to really make a big difference. Because if Trump really screws up badly, which he, very likely will, and says crazy things, maybe she can get an advantage. But I think people expect Trump to say crazy things and don't seem to be worried about that. They're willing to put up with it. It's incredible to me, but that's the way it is.
Well, David Brooks in his piece really explains this, I think, pretty well, why there is support for Trump from, it seems rock solid. Although the support is also rock solid, is it not, for Harris? For example, you're not going to leave Harris, right? I mean, you're there for her regardless.
Yeah.
And that seems to be the same for his voters as well.
By the way, just for the record, David Brooks actually supports Harris.
No, he does. He does support her, but he explains, I think, pretty well why there is such a strong core base that Trump enjoys. I think he does explain that in his piece, which we'll get to. That was more my point, not that Brooks himself. Brooks meets the definition of a typical Harris supporter as he describes it: an elite, highly educated, living in a coastal state. That's Harris's meat, and I think he makes the point that is part of the reason Trump also has a lot of support. I'm going to just put Arlen's name up for now, even though we don't have his picture. So I thought that was very interesting. But again, you're not going to, you're polarized too, right? I mean, you don't see yourself. And I was interested in Arlen because you had said that you'd be very disappointed in Harris if she didn't back away from the Biden policy, basically supporting Israel at all costs. She did back away from Biden's call for 39.6% capital gains tax on the wealthiest or the highest earning Americans. She did take a different stance. She supports a lower top marginal capital gains tax rate than Biden has called for, but she seems unwilling to break with him when it comes to the unwavering support for Israel. So that's I think especially problematic, Arlen.
Well, I think she's purposely trying to go right to the middle, to be, not to offend anybody. And, that's just not the way things work anymore. People are looking for change. People are upset with the way our country is going. And she's got to be a change leader, but she doesn't seem to want to be a change leader. So she's backed away from a few things like Medicare for all, fracking. And I think it's been that's not going to enamor her with progressives. So I hope they, get some new campaign strategy, because I don't think what she's doing is working. Well, you can tell by the polls, it's not working.
Well, I showed the poll before, Arlen, and there you just have, I don't know how to do this without your face, and it just is so pixelated, I think is the term we use. Let me put up the policies. I've been sharing this quite a bit, and I know some people didn't like this this meme or whatever you want to call it. I guess they call it a meme. I don't really know why it's called a meme, but that's the term. A lot of people didn't like this, but I think it's actually pretty darn fair to both Harris and Trump in terms of the policies, and I think these are really important. I call her a proto-fascist, Arlen, not personally because I think she wants to be queen or she wants to be the dictator or she's another Evita Peron, but it's because the policies that she seems to be embracing are indeed proto-fascist. They're corporatist. They're militarist. We aren't seeing her calling for some kind of wealth and power redistribution to poor, struggling, and working people. And that is how you get fascism.
Yeah, she doesn't, like I say, she doesn't want to make any big changes. She wants things to be like they are, which is, the American people want some changes. And if she's not willing to do it, then they might go with Trump. And,
Arlen,
Trump, who knows?
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I mean, who knows what Trump's going to do? He could do anything, but he's got people behind him that are, I think, pretty scary. All the Fox News people, the Tucker Carlsons, and all those crazy people that they're going to want, their share of the pie. So, and like I say, Project 2025 is horrible. Their vice president, J.D. Vance, is horrible. I see nothing good that could come out of this, and I think democracy will be hurt because it'll be tougher for Democrats to win in the future. I think, with all voter suppression and other ways that the Republicans are trying to keep Democrats down in the polls.
Arlen, you have expressed hope. I think that's the right word, but again, correct me if I get anything wrong. You've expressed hope that Kamala would at some point change policies, at least when it comes to Israel. Do you still have that hope, or is it fainter now? Maybe you still have it, but it's less strong, or do you just think she's just following her advisors in terms of politics, but when it comes to the actual governing, if she wins, she will really take into account the terrible trials and tribulations of the Palestinian people?
Well, she could do whatever she wants when she's elected, and we'll have a little bit more freedom, I think. But right now, she probably feels constricted, like she can't go too far one way or another. And whoever's running her campaign or herself can't see the problem, can't see that she's got to do a whole lot more, and then she's going to lose. And
all right.
And of course, the college students see what's going on too in Gaza, and they're going to be, demonstrating more and more, and it's not going to be good for the country in a lot of ways.
Well, I talk about this a lot, and this is the issue that really has ultimately is the reason I will not vote for Kamala Harris. And I told you on this program, I was completely sincere, Arlen, that I was hopeful that she would take a more measured stance. She would be less completely supportive of Israel. And she's made it clear in interviews at the DNC, in her tweets, that the Palestinian people are not on her radar screen. What Israel is doing to them is not something that she takes into account. And I'll show this now. So she tweeted out back on September 1st, there was the six hostages that were found dead in Gaza, included an American, Hirsch Goldberg, Poland. And she writes, "We now know he was murdered." I highlight a couple. "We know he was murdered by Hamas, and Hamas is an evil terrorist organization." So first of all, she kind of jumped the gun there. We don't absolutely know that they were murdered. He was murdered by Hamas. Hamas claimed on that same day that she tweeted out, "We now know," or "We know he was murdered by Hamas," that Hamas said, "No, we did not kill those hostages. They were killed by Israeli airstrikes." And we don't know. How can we know? Because Israel is constantly bombing Gaza with our bombs. So it is plausible. As far as I know, there certainly has not been any, investigation that confirmed that these hostages were murdered by Hamas. And yet she just immediately takes Israel's position, although Israel isn't really credible. They just aren't. And to just add on to this, the hostage families are very, very clear that it's Netanyahu's fault. So even when the video surfaced that Hamas, was propaganda video that Hamas circulated of Hirsch Goldberg, Poland, the family said, "No, go ahead and show it. We understand it's propaganda from Hamas." But the family of Goldberg, Poland, and the families of the hostages all blame Netanyahu for this, even though they might not say that they don't know whether it was an Israeli bomb, but they know, they believe very, very strongly that the failure to rescue the hostages, to take the hostages from Hamas, was the result of Netanyahu policies. And she can't say that. She won't say that.
I know, and I wish you would. Obviously, Israeli has a very powerful lobby, and she doesn't want to lose any of that support, I suppose. But the hostage families are correct. They're not going to get their hostages back if we continue the way things are going. The only way it's going to happen, if it's going to happen at all, would be with a ceasefire. And Netanyahu is completely against that. And so Americans have to really put a lot of pressure on Israel in order to make any kind of change or get them to be more amenable to, a ceasefire. And I'm like I say, I'm hoping Kama will change, but right now she doesn't seem to want to.
All right, so let me ask you this, because usually I kind of rake you over the coals, Arlen, and say, you should change your view. Why don't you think the way I do? Let me ask it in a sort of a more gentle way and not to be so obnoxious like I often am. Can you understand where I'm coming from? I know you're, as much as you, I think, correctly share my concerns about the Biden-Harris policy towards Israel. Can you understand why it has caused me to simply say, no, I won't support Kamala Harris for president?
Yeah, you have reasons, especially if you take that into mind. I think there's more to the world than just, Israel and Gaza. And so, I think you got to look at the entirety before if you're going to choose a candidate. But yeah, there's no reason, if you feel that strongly, if that's your number one issue, that it's logical that you would probably, well, you could go with somebody else, but of course, if you go with Trump, he's not going to be any better either. So,
well, I'm not. I've been very clear. I will not vote for Trump. He would be worse. But to be fair to me, Arlen, I'm not as. Yes, this is a litmus test for me. It's true, Israel, but there are other issues where I'm very unhappy with Harris. It's not like this is. I otherwise think she's okay. I think she's terrible on every issue. But I would have been willing to vote for her if I thought she was better. She would really change policy on Israel. That's where I am with that.
Well, yeah, and I wish you would be more progressive. I think Bernie Sanders was saying the same thing. She's just trying to, move toward the center and not going for any progressive stands on anything. And she's got to get people fired up. And if she doesn't, I mean, that's really crucial. You got to get people to the polls. You got to have them working and fighting hard to get her, get her to win. And at this point, I don't think there's that enthusiasm right now. And that she's got to do that because, there's, yeah.
No, I'm sorry. Go. Yeah, you're just talking about the enthusiasm problem. We're going to get to the David Brooks piece, and I'm being a little bit unfair to Arlen because I invite him on, but I just wanted to juxtapose her reaction to the killing of Hersh Goldberg Poland, an American who was taken hostage, with the killing of a Turkish American woman who was shot dead by Israeli forces at a West Bank protest. This was on Friday. This came out, Arlen. I don't know if you're familiar with this story. This is a horrific story. Let me show the picture. This is an American woman of American Turkish, I guess her dad is a Turkish person, a Turkish man, and her mom is an American. There she is. There's her graduation from the University of Washington. This year, Arlen, she's the one who was shot dead. She was shot in the head. She was in a protest at the West Bank, on the West Bank against the Israeli occupation there, and specifically the ongoing, the settlements, as well as now the military moving in. And she was shot in the head. She was shot in the head by apparently an Israeli sniper. And there was no condemnation by the vice president or by, remember her response to the killing of Hersh Goldberg Poland, which we don't even know for certain was by Hamas. We know for certain that this woman, Eigel, 22 years old, was shot in the head while she was peacefully protesting. And the response from the State Department is simply, we deplore the death. That's it. There's no condemnation. They don't say Israel is evil. And this we absolutely know for a fact was due to Israeli military activity.
Well, there's really no point going over and over again about the atrocities, that the Israelis are doing because, and of course, Hamas has done some very, terrible atrocities themselves, and this is what happens when you have war. So,
American citizen, U.S. citizen is killed and shot in the head. just Friday.
Lots of people are getting killed. I know, and it's horrible. Just like any war is horrible, and there's no excuse for the Biden-Harris administration not to work much harder at getting some kind of a ceasefire, some kind of settlement, because it can't go on the way it is. It's just untenable.
Arlen, you're my guest. We should talk about what you want to discuss. So this column by opinion piece by David Brooks, How Trump Wins and Harris and the Democrats Blow It. Interestingly, Brooks doesn't mention the Middle East policy. He doesn't see that as, I guess, part and parcel of perhaps alienation of voters. But you do. So you're going to throw that on top of the pile of the reasons that Brooks gives. I took quite a number of segments from it, but was there something in particular that struck you as, you read this and you thought, yeah, Brooks is spot on. This is a real problem for Kamala Harris?
By the way, I do have to say how I don't think the American voters really are paid that much attention to Israel and Gaza the way you do. So that's not going to be the number one issue. But
I agree with you. I totally agree. Yeah. And I even would go so far as to say this, Arlen, I think she may be right to kind of downplay it, because Jewish voters, for whatever reason, are very, very strongly pro-Israel. Very unfortunately, in my view, very sadly, in my view, it's a real tough situation. Plus, if she came out against Israel, then she would face a barrage. Millions and millions of dollars would be poured into smearing her, attacking her by AIPAC and associated groups, affiliated groups. And they would go after her for reasons that have, using arguments that have zero to do with Israel. They wouldn't come clean and say, we're going after her because we don't like her Israeli policy. They would say she was soft on crime. They would, point out how she flip-flopped on various issues. So she's got it's tough. If her only concern is winning the election, she may be right not to criticize Israel.
It is very hard. That there is. I like to think there's a split with Jewish people on this. Some are very hawkish. Some, like me, want to see some peace and are very angry with, the Israeli government. So. And you're right, somebody's going to be offended, so she's probably going to be as careful as possible not to offend anybody. But again, that's just how she is. She's very cautious. But, as far as David Brooks, he made 5 points that, make sense. Like the number one, people like the red model more than the blue. And he points out that the fastest growing states are some of those red states, Texas, Florida, and so on, they have an appeal. They, maybe have less taxes and a little bit friendlier to business. So, so as a rule, American people seem to feel the same way.
Well, I think he makes a great point here. I mean, I highlighted this. I hope you can see it. The inequality is so tremendous in our country, but it does seem even worse. And it is even worse, I think, on the coast for several reasons. One, the wealthiest Americans would rather live. Frankly, wouldn't you rather live in Manhattan, San Francisco, Washington, D.C., than Tulsa or Tuscaloosa? I mean, I don't mean to be obnoxious about it, but people in those areas who strike it rich, they very often buy third, fourth homes in places that I just mentioned. But I don't think there are too many Monterey millionaires who are looking for houses in Wichita. So the point is, the quality, the physical beauty, the amenities are better in blue states, but that also does lead to higher inequality. And the Democratic leaders in those states have failed utterly to reduce wealth and income inequality.
Yeah. I think Brooks makes a major point about so much of the country resents, the well-educated, the richer people. They don't, they seem to get everything, and the average American doesn't. So there's a lot of resentment. and the Democrats are seen more as like the party of the ruling class, and that's one of the points that Brooks makes. Is a major point that Brooks makes. So the Democrats have to get with the people in the blue states, the average rural type individual. If they don't get some of those people, they're going to lose the election, because those are the smaller states and are the ones that benefit by the electoral college. And that could be a real problem for the Democrats.
100%, Arlen. He makes the point. There's so much there. A lot I felt were good arguments. Many Americans, and especially in the redder states or in many of the purple states like Michigan, that will decide the election, feel betrayed, distrustful, and angry. They feel that the American dream has been destroyed, and it's been destroyed more so for many in those blue states we just mentioned. I mean, housing costs are so, you pay $2.5 million for a little 3-bedroom postage stamp lot in Silicon Valley. So most people can't afford that, obviously. Even the very overpaid, in my opinion, police in those areas, in very rich areas, they pay them an enormous amount because they're protecting the billionaire class, or want their own property protected. They can't even live in those communities. They live further out, although they live pretty well.
Yeah, and I think Trump.
Go ahead.
I think Trump is seen as the change agent. I think those who support him are very, very wrong, and I wish they think differently. But he definitely does promote some kind of change, make things different, and they just don't want. Americans don't seem to want to keep things as they are right now, because there's just a lot of turmoil, economic uncertainty, too many wars going on, and so they're a little hesitant to stick with what we have, which is basically the Biden policy. And they're crazy to want Trump, because Trump, who knows what kind of terrible things he would do or allow to have happen. Especially, he would, come to think of it, he would be putting judges on the Supreme Court if he were in office, and the Supreme Court would be even worse than it is now, if that's possible. So yeah.
Well, I think, to be fair to Trump, his justices aren't the most extreme on the court. Maybe Amy Coney Barrett's pretty far to the right, but the two most extreme are Thomas and Alito, and neither one was appointed by Trump. And frankly, both Kavanaugh and Gorsuch are kind of centrist. They're not super hard right. Now, they do vote with the Republicans. I'm not glad they're on the court. I'm not trying to defend them. I'm just simply saying his justices haven't been the most egregious or extreme. That said, no, they're not good. No, we don't want them. 100% on that, Arlen. You mentioned that Americans want change, and Brooks made the point, and certainly that was what Obama campaigned on, right? I'm hope and change. That was his motto or calling card or what have you. And by the way, so did Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton said, I feel your pain. I feel your pain, right? They campaigned on the idea they were going to make things better for people in the heartland. And I think we have to admit, they did not do that. Now, Brooks says, well, they still remain popular across the country. Maybe there's some personal popularity that those two enjoy, but the policies that they pursued did not improve the quality of life for most Americans.
You're right. They pulled back when they should have gone forward with some more progressive policies and made some real major changes, but they're not, they're very cautious, and that's the way they ran.
Well, they're corporatists. They're corporate. They're corporate controlled. Yeah. I mean, let's be honest. They're corrupted by our politics. And in terms of change, Brooks makes this point too, that the change that Democrats pursue. So now, Brooks isn't elitist. Brooks doesn't care. Brooks doesn't believe in redistributing wealth. He's perfectly happy with enormous levels of inequality. He never mentions that this is a problem. This is what I'm saying is the problem. But he says, to the extent that there is more inequality in our country, it's because of democratic policies, which is BS. it's because of policies both parties pursued, where they empowered the corporatists, they offshore, they destroyed unions. That's why. But he does point out that there is change that Democrats have pursued, and those changes have been viewed certainly as very destabilizing, especially the social changes, right? The defund the police movement, which the Democrats never embraced, the pro-choice and gay rights and all that, which I certainly support all of those, but those are viewed with some reason as destabilizing at least some of the institutions that are bring some cohesion to the heartland, are viewed as being destabilized by those policies.
I think the best policy that the Democrats have is, women's rights and, leaving them with the ability to choose what they want to do, and that will help them. But when you come right to the final analysis, Hal, you say the Democrats are corporatist. Obviously, Republicans too. Our entire political system is corporatist, and our politicians depend on donations, and that's the major problem. I don't know how we could fix it, but that is the way things are. And and of course the moral issues are important too. People get a little bit maybe scared when their religious views are questioned, or this thing about LBGQ and all that. It scares a lot of people, and they're they're hesitant to go along with the Democrats, who might encourage that.
Well, the fact is that a lot of the social justice changes we've seen over the past 70 years have actually now I don't think there's cause and effect whatsoever. I don't think that they're correlated by time, but not by effect. But the women's rights movement, the civil rights movement, the gay rights movement, tragically, the environmental movement, these have all come about at a time of when we saw increasing inequality. So in the the 50s, before these movements really took hold and we had significant legal changes, we're a time of the 30s, 40s, 50s, we're a time of much greater equality, much less inequality. African American families actually were less, were relatively more affluent compared to white families before the civil rights, laws went into effect. Now, after Title, I don't know I don't know all the numbers, so I'm terrible on that, so I don't want to say. But after the civil rights laws were passed, signed into law by LBJ, we continued to see the wealth and income inequality reduce between blacks and whites. But since the 70s, they've skyrocketed. So, in fact, there hasn't been a corresponding improvement in the quality of life for working people during the same time that there have been all these social changes. And so it's understandable that people would look, well, wait a second, gay rights, women's rights, civil rights for African Americans, those have not made my life better. They made them worse. They made it worse.
Well, the Republican cultists, don't care about anybody's rights so much. That they just care about, making it easy for the corporatist elements and businesses and frankly, white Americans to, live the kind of life they've always had and keep the advantages that they have. And the Republican cult doesn't
but
want to
white
make
Americans' lives haven't gotten better either. That's the point, right? They've gotten worse in a lot of ways. You just saw. Let me see if I can get that slide up. I mean, that's Brooks' point, is that for working class people, black and white, as a matter of fact, things have not gotten better over the past 70 years, and for many, they've gotten worse. The average high school grad dies 9 years sooner than a college grad, is more likely to be obese, much less likely to marry. That's a big deal, and is much more likely to divorce. So these people can't have happy family lives. They don't have any soda. Their overdose death rate is super high, and it's not as though you say that Republicans don't care. Maybe they don't, but the policies that Democrats have pursued have also exacerbated these terrible impacts on working people.
Yeah, the Democrats haven't figured out a way to change these kind of things. And by the way, I think what you're showing now is not about Black people specifically. I think Blacks have done well. I think, a lot of minorities have done better and are likely in the future to do better with the Democrats. But, there's just such a wide swath of people all through the country that are, pretty, rigid in their views, conservative in their views, and worry about some of these new things that are coming along and changes, and especially since it doesn't, what's going on now doesn't seem to help them, get a better grasp on their, jobs, cost of living, and income. They want to see more, but they're not seeing it.
You're watching Halitics. We've got Arlen's and Arlen Monday call in. You don't see Arlen because not great video today. We'll see if we can fix that for next week. But we'd love to hear from you. Got a great caller, first-time caller to Halitics, not first-time caller to my programs. Lawrence called Friday. So if you want to join us, 240-242-5646. I'm not monitoring the chat right now because I'm very deeply engaged in my discussion with Arlen. So if you're chatting there, that's great. Please keep it up. I hope there's discussion. I don't know if there is, but I'm not able to monitor that as well. But I do hope you'll call in if you want to talk. 240-242-5646.
Excuse me. I listened to your caller on Friday, and it was good. He was apparently a former KRXA listener and, wanted to, continue the conversations like we used to have on KRXA. But yeah, it was good to hear him.
It's funny because a lot of people think Arlen, and by the way, I appreciate your listening and watching. I thought you only were interested in the Monday program, which if I were you would be my only interest, but I'm glad you're checking me out on other days. I think a lot of people feel, and the caller Friday felt, that my views have changed, right? That I have a different, that I've become more anti-democratic than I used to be, anti-democratic party. I honestly don't think that's true. I may be wrong. I think people often hear what they want to hear when they watch a host. And I remember I did a program towards the end of the KRXA 540 run where you may even remember this, I got a lot of commentary on it, where I really went after Obama and I was harshly critical of his policies. And, I don't think that position then really is any different than the position I take now, which is that the Democratic Party has betrayed working people.
Well, you have your own positions, Hal, that they're kind of not the
Unique.
mainstream. Yeah,
they certainly are.
Unique, exactly. So, it seems like these days people either want one side strongly or the other side strongly, either right wing or left wing, and of course you're somewhere in the middle. And
I think it's different than that, Arlen. I think what we have is a electorate that really doesn't want one side or the other. So I don't think, for example, you don't really want. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't want to put words in your mouth. You tell me if I'm wrong. I don't get the sense that you really want Kamala. I get the sense you really don't want Trump.
Well, Kamala to me would be, 100 times better, but she's not, my favorite, especially the way she's, running her campaign right now. But yeah, I think Trump would be horrendous for this country.
Right. So it's not that you want Kamala. You don't. We've just been discussed a number of areas where as far as I could tell from your perspective, the Democrats, I certainly think, but I think you do too, maybe to a lesser degree, where the Democrats have also fallen short. But your view is, well, the Republicans are so awful, I'm voting against them. It's not so much I love the Democrats. In fact, if you thought Jill Stein had a real shot at winning, maybe you'd even vote for her. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's my view. So your vote is more aligned with, I hate the Republicans are awful. I'm terrified of what the Republicans could bring to the table. And I think that's why so many people are voting against Democrats as well. that they'll vote for Trump, not because they particularly love Trump. You saw Trump lost a significant amount of support as soon as Biden dropped out. That's because his support, at least some of it, is relatively soft. People were just, I can't take Biden. I'm voting against him. He's demented. He can't string a sentence together. His policies led to inflation, what have you. So I'm going to hope for something better from Kamala. Not that I love her, but she's better, So I think it's not that people are so polarized. I think we're offered two very, very bad choices, and we don't know where else to turn.
Yeah, I think I've been saying all along that I'm not really thrilled with what the Democratic Party is doing. I think the Republican Party, I don't think it's a party right now, it's a cult, but I think they keep getting worse. And you're right. I'm not a big fan of Kamala, and my main focus is defeating Trump. And if Jill Stein had a chance, I might vote for her too, but I don't think she doesn't have a chance. And I don't see how she will ever have a chance as long as, the corporatist elite, the billionaires are in charge of this country.
Well, then isn't that why we have to vote for her, so that they won't be in charge anymore? Isn't that the best argument for voting for her?
If you could find enough people to support her, sure, but you're not. The people are not going to go with her to any large extent. I mean,
well, that's what your job is. You're a pundit. You're a thought leader. Lead us with your thoughts to a different place. Ooh,
well, I can't get people to, change their mind, especially, when let's face it, this country is run by money. That's the most important thing, profit. So I don't see how anything will change. And, especially, with the media going. So there's so many right-wing media now that they really push hard, and a lot of people are making money off this right-wing media, and they keep pushing this kind of stuff. And so it's worse than it used to be, the media.
All right, let's get to your second article. I wanted to talk a little bit, Arlen, and a story that I thought you might actually kind of glom onto also, which is the Justice Department. I think they indicted a couple of Russian nationals who have apparently invested in American, what do you call them? Social media influencers, people who do videos, podcasts like I do. They're not giving me any money, by the way, and don't, because I don't want to get in any trouble. But, this kind of does support the view, and I've been very skeptical of it, and I remain extremely skeptical of the idea that these types of foreign influence campaigns have any real impact on our elections. But it's clear, is it not, that Russia, at least some Russians, and I presumably tied to Putin, were trying to fund, or were funding, pro-Trump media outlets.
Yeah, I've been arguing with people for years, saying that, the Russians have really put in a lot of effort and money into helping Trump, and they probably helped him in 2016, and they certainly wanted him to win in 2020. So, that I think is clear to me. And they, other countries should not be influencing our campaigns. There's no excuse for it. So I'm glad Justice Department went after these people. But, who knows also what Iran is doing, what China is doing. Technology.
We know Israel's incredible. Israel is basically, our media is basically an arm of Israel at this point, right? I mean, the New York Times, all the media outlets are extremely deferential to the Israeli position on issues. They don't even need to be paid, but they are, presumably, I guess, to get some money. So yeah, we have a lot of influence from foreign countries, and my concern is, policy is do I support the policies or not? And I don't like the democratic policy with respect to Ukraine, Russia. So, you want us to have peace with Russia? You want peace with Russia? I want peace with Russia. My view.
Of course. But I think I don't want Ukraine to lose this. I don't want them to lose territory. And the Russians are pushing very hard to take over the country. So, you and I disagree on
We disagree
that,
on this. We disagree because I think they've lost terribly. But let's get. But the flip side, the counter argument, just so we don't leave it with just my view, the counter argument is, well, Yeah, things haven't gone well for Ukraine, but they'd be even worse if we weren't helping them. Um, so here's here's the second story you brought to my attention, Arlen. I didn't see this at all. The high price of safety in El Salvador, from also the New York Times. Why did this article strike you? Why did you want to? What in it do you think is really important to highlight?
Well, I think it's a trend. It's a worldwide trend where people are willing to put up with an authoritarian, dictator type person if they're going to crack down on crime. The way that this particular leader his name is Nayib Bukele in El Salvador. He's very popular, and he's cut the crime down considerably, and the people are glad about that. But there is a cost, of course, and the cost of civil liberties, but I think that seems to be the trend all around the world. People are willing to, stay with this authoritarian type leader if he'll, keep crime down and keep a lid on it, any problems, and they think somehow that'll be better for them than the more democratic systems, which haven't been doing very well lately. Let's face it.
Well, can you blame them? I certainly can't. It sort of reminds me of the mafia in Sicily. When Mussolini took office, he just locked up everybody. He just had his police go in there and military. He'd send soldiers into Sicily and I guess Naples, wherever there was organized crime. And if they suspected you, because the police knew who the people were, you could never get a conviction against any mafioso because they would kill the judge, they would kill the prosecutor. Anybody was arrested, they would be shot. The police arresting them, plus any witnesses would be killed. So Mussolini didn't bother with that. He just sent the army out and he just locked them up and he didn't give them trials or anything. And it actually made life better for a lot of peasants and people who were terrorized by these thugs, by these organized mafia crime thugs. So that's what Mussolini did, and after he was deposed and the U.S. came in, the Americans came in, they opened up the prisons. They said, well, these are political prisoners. They're probably not, there's no proof. There weren't even trials for half of them. And then, of course, the crime rate skyrocketed right in the wake of all that. So I don't blame the Salvadoran people for saying we have been prisoners for generations, or for a generation at least, because of these thugs, these gangsters, these drug lords, and we've had it. We'll take anything but that.
Yeah, in El Salvador, he's arrested all kinds of people and locked so many people up, and a lot of it is abusive. People are innocent, many of them, and they're not getting fair trials. But I guess the overall effect for the people of El Salvador it's worth it. Especially that's what the leader says. It's worth it. If people feel better and safer, then if they lose a few civil liberties, that's okay.
Well, that's the problem, right? Yeah. I mean, and it's not that they even feel better; they are safer, right? I mean, they can't walk. Yeah. He said, "Look, here's this guy Del Cid. Just what you were saying. He knew completely innocent people who were taken by the police and never came back." He agreed there's terrible abuses of power, and he says there's corruption. He doesn't doubt it. It's not just that they make mistakes because there aren't enough checks and balances. These are, you give the police all that power, they're corrupt. They're absolutely corrupt. But he then says it had been so bad for so long. Children couldn't even walk on the streets. An older woman was shot. His sister couldn't stay in El Salvador because she would have been probably kidnapped, raped by these gangsters. Maybe they would try to make her into a prostitute. So, I mean, what's the lesson? What's the lesson we should be taking from this, Arlen?
Well, the lesson might be that keep your democracy, keep things as democratic as you can, but still, come down hard on crime. Democrats haven't been doing that, so I think that's a problem why they're not doing as well. But around the world, I think this is happening more and more, where the strongman is coming in and taking over. And I can see it in Mexico. Mexico seems like a impossibly ungovernable country, but I'm surprised they haven't done something like this yet, and maybe they will. But yeah, I personally, believe in the civil liberties and democracy, but at the same time, you can be tough on, criminals and people who are abusing, lots of things, financial affairs in different countries. It's a balancing act.
Isn't well, before I give you what I believe my lesson is, I think this is a good time to just show. And by the way, again, you're watching Halitics. We're going a little over an hour. But Arlen, given your concerns about civil liberties, which I share, by the way, I totally share them. I don't want police that just run rampant and deny people's rights. I just understand how it happens when you have crime lords in complete control, and why people would embrace even authoritarianism, even fascism, even military rule, so that they can walk down their street without getting shot, so that their daughter or their sister doesn't have to risk being molested every time she walks out of her home by armed thugs. But given that view, which we share, let me play this ad. I want your thoughts, Arlen, on it. Let me actually have to go to a different place. This is by an RFK Jr. ad. So let's see if we can get this for you. Here we go.
Now, Senator Harris says she's proud of her record as a prosecutor and that she'll be a prosecutor president, but I'm deeply concerned about this record. There are too many examples to cite, but she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations.
Okay, let me stop it. Let me stop it then for a second. So we'll replay that video because I think it's a really instructive. I'll get it so that it goes out to you, Arlen. Sorry that you're not hearing it. Obviously, I said I didn't make any changes, but this must be one area where I don't have the audio. I have to actually direct audio. It says to Google Voice Call, line 18. Maybe it's just not loud enough. Let me see if I can get it a little louder, Arlen, because it does show it's going to. Let's try this one more time. Tell me if you can hear this, Arlen. Right, here we go.
Now, Senator Harris says she's proud of her record as a prosecutor.
Can you hear that?
She'll be a prosecutor president,
really.
but I'm deeply concerned about this record.
Well, what she's saying is, what Tulsi Gabbard is saying is she's very concerned about the record that Harris has as a prosecutor, and she's going to go and list areas where she believes strongly that she abused, that Kamala abused her authority when she was the DA in San Francisco and the Attorney General in San Francisco. The DA in San Francisco, the California State Attorney General. Let's see if we can get this so you can hear it.
There are too many examples to cite, but she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana.
And I inhaled. I didn't.
Sorry?
No,
You're catching
it. That's very.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's unfair. I think Tulsi Gabbard has, switched sides.
Well, forgetting about what I understand, you may not like the messenger, but the message itself is what matters. And as far as I understand, there's no inaccuracies in this video.
I did inhale.
There is actually.
She did laugh. She did laugh when she did in fact laugh about inhaling, and she also did continue to lock up marijuana dealers, which is, how you get these armed thugs, because by making the drug trade illegal, you have supercharged profits, right? That's how come we don't have Al Capone anymore. We don't have Al Capone's. He lived during Prohibition because alcohol was illegal, but now alcohol is sold legally, so you don't have Seagrams shooting people in the streets. And here, Harris did
Yeah.
lock people up for marijuana, and she did laugh about inhaling. I'm sorry. Go ahead, though. Respond.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we ought to know is the Attorney General, that's not her job to prosecute marijuana cases. That's for others to do. So she's not really responsible.
Well, she
for all
was the
this.
San Francisco DA, and they
Yeah,
do,
but
and
not the one
and the
that-
state has prosecutorial discretion, as does the district attorney. So she doesn't have to
Oh, so local-
prosecute people. Let me play some
Blocked
more.
evidence. She blocked evidence that would have freed an innocent man from death row until the courts forced her to do so. She kept people in prison beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor for the state of California. And she fought to keep cash bail system in place that impacts poor people in the worst kind of way. And the people who suffered under your reign as prosecutor, you owe them an apology.
So that'll do that, but it's very powerful. I get you don't agree with all of that, Arlen, but isn't that a pretty powerful indictment of her record?
I think it's unfair. I think Tulsi Gabbard is just trying to hurt Kama, and she's using whatever she can to think of. But it's local district attorneys, not Kama, who is supposed to prosecute all those marijuana smokers. And also Kama laughed at saying that, hey, I didn't inhale, but she wasn't laughing at the people in jail, which was the implication, I think, that.
No, but
Tulsi
she's
Gabbard-
laughing as though it's funny that she inhaled, but at the same time, and you said talking about local DAs, remember, Kamala was a local DA. That's how she started her career, as San Francisco DA. And that she did prosecute aggressively low-level drug offenders.
I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, those 1,500 that Tulsi was talking about, that's not, on Kamala. So I think it's unfair to paint her as the one responsible for that. And I don't see anything wrong with laughing about, saying, hey, I didn't inhale or whatever. That's, she's not laughing at the victims, at the ones in jail for doing that. So,
well, but she's laughing at the crime. She's saying, look, I did this crime. Who cares? But yet at the same time, so this is from the Mercury News. Let me just read this. Here's how Kamala Harris really prosecuted marijuana cases. Campaign fact check. So let's see if this is true. Maybe it isn't true. Well, I can't because I don't subscribe to that stupid newspaper, which I should. I'd have to go find it because I can't tell so there are various. I have heard that she prosecuted minor drug. According to the Mercury News, Harris oversaw approximately 1,900 marijuana convictions as DA of San Francisco. She prosecuted more people than her predecessor, Terrence Hallinan, who was considered more liberal. He was a Republican, by the way. Data compiled by the California Attorney General's office found that under Harris, 24% of marijuana arrests, 24% of arrests led to convictions. Well, under Hallinan, only 18%. So that's too many. Also, under Harris, only 45 people went to state prison. So she didn't lock people up, but she sent them to county prison or did other, or gave them other options. So the fact of the matter is, she did, as San Francisco DA, prosecute people for a crime, in quotes, that she laughed about having committed herself, Arlen. That is true.
Well,
that's a fact.
Forget about the laughing. That's ridiculous. We all laugh about things like that when Bill Clinton said he would inhale. But, she had a job to do. And this was 5 years ago. I think marijuana laws have liberalized since then. I don't think she would be as tough on marijuana smoking now as she maybe would have done then. So I think that they're just cheap little things that Tulsi's, trying to, make Kamala look bad, but I don't think it's really that important in my opinion.
All right, we'll let you have the last word on that. I won't push back on that issue whatsoever, but I made the point. So let's go ahead. Yeah, and then I'm going to give you a final word because we've gone through the deck, and I just really want to play that because I thought maybe in light of the situation in El Salvador and how they've cracked down so aggressively on these drug cartels, and how it has led to a significant erosion of freedom, but still welcomed by the populace because of such high crime rates, you might have had some thoughts on Gabbard's record as a prosecutor. But Your thought is that it's not such a big deal, I guess.
I think there are lessons we could learn. You do have to be tough on these kind of criminals, and the Democrats can't, push issues of being soft on crime or being against the police or anything like that. They've got to talk like they're strongly in support of security and safety. I think that's really important. But tomorrow's going to be an important debate. I think that may change things. But like I said before, I think it's most important thing is Tulsi's got to change her style and her method of campaigning. So that
you mean Kamala? I'm sorry, you mean Kamala, right? Not Tulsi.
I'm sorry. Yeah, Kamala Harris. She's got to change her strategies. She got to change the way she's running her campaign, because if she doesn't come across stronger, then Trump's going to be the one that's going to be in the White House. And that's
I think you're being a little alarmist with regard to your view. I know you're very concerned Trump could win, Arlen. And I am too. I don't want Trump to win. But for me, the problem is I also don't want Harris to win. I think, I don't know. It's not early. We only have, less than 2 months now. It's going to be a toss-up. And I guess she has to do. I don't know what to say at this point, because I think both candidates are so compromised and their views are just, it's hard for me because I find what they say so unattractive and unappealing that I don't know what I would tell either one to do. Except endorse Jill Stein. I would tell them to endorse Jill Stein is what I do. But
right now the candidates are pretty much tied, and it's going to be very close the way it looks right now. And that probably will work to Trump's advantage, which is what worries me the most, because he's got the smaller states and got the Electoral College in his favor, and so that scares me.
It could work the other way, though, Arlen, just to play devil's advocate. If you look at the New York Times, they aggregate the polls in the crucial states. And according to them, I think it's basically Harris has a tiny lead in both Wisconsin and Michigan and is either down by a point or tied in Pennsylvania. So that just supports the view, right? It's a toss-up. It's a toss-up.
Well, and I will do everything I can to support her. I'll probably go work for the Democratic Party. Especially the down ballot races are going to be crucial because the Senate and the House are so close now. And if the Democrats don't do better, in the House and the Senate, then nothing is going to get done, even if Harris becomes president.
Arlen, thank you so much for joining me. That is the last word on Halitics. We will have another Arlen Monday, hopefully this Monday. I will be back tomorrow. Have a great afternoon if you're on the East Coast. And Arlen, just stick with me for just a moment after the program. Usually you do, but I just want to go over the visual, see if we can get it a little better for next time, if possible.
Goodbye, all.